Well,
Hey, Kerry
good
Lee.
afternoon, Raymond.
Hey, Kerry Lee. Hello, Nicholas. Hey,
Yes.
Nicholas.
So thanks very much. It's good to team up with my good friend and fellow legal passionate person, Raymond Meneses. And this afternoon, we're going to be talking about masks and what you should consider wearing. A lot of organizations are going to be resuming operations from Monday, hopefully, once government gazettes the final legislation with regards to what level 3 is going to entail. I think many people have seen the draft regulations. Raymond, what do you think of the draft regulations?
I think that makes sense. I think it's a difficult balance to achieve, to get the economy kickstarted again and to safeguard people's safety and integrity. So I think that the state's been grappling with that fairly effectively. And if everybody plays ball, I think they're going to be effective. I think it's going to work.
100%. And I think that in general is what society has been crying out for kind of from the beginning, is that they would be treated like adults. And I echo the sentiments of the state president on Sunday, where he said, it's now in your hands, South Africa. The outcome of how this pandemic escalates as such is now in your hands.
Yeah.
So we have to respond appropriately. And I think it might be an interesting digress at the end of this to engage. And I've had many conversations on this during the course of the day of discussing how religious organizations now escalate or put specific controls in place to be able to meet again. And whether we go into that topic of conversation or not, we'll decide at the end. But today we want to talk about masks. So Raymond, what masks have you been wearing?
I've been wearing mostly the homemade variety 3-layer cloth mask.
3-layer cloth mask. How do you find it?
Very uncomfortable if it doesn't fit, if it's not made to measure. I have two that are comfortable. One that my wife made that's absolutely superb. It really fits me well. But that doesn't help if you go out to the shops. It's going to be washed. I can wear it again, so I can hardly use it 10 minutes later.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, continue.
No, I
got a very comfortable one from Ian Wilson from Single Track Minded.
Oh, excellent.
Gave me a nice branded one. It was actually really cool. Yeah.
Very, very nice. I received an SMS yesterday from somebody asking me if I had a particular mask type, and then proceeded to send me a picture of what they were looking for. And it basically looked like a pair of black underpants with a valve stuck onto it. And I fear that some people may have been taking. Anyway, maybe we'll just leave that there. But let's talk cloth masks to begin with. Let's talk it, in my mind, at the bottom end of the cycle. If I understand government's motivation behind suggesting cloth masks to the general member of the public, it's just that. In my mind, it is designed for the general member of the public who doesn't have either funding or access to specialized equipment or PPE, etc. So it's something that's affordable. It's something that somebody could make at home. It is better than having nothing without any need for kind of further discussion. It is definitely better than having nothing. However, if I understand government's motivation behind suggesting cloth masks as well, general member of the public, it's better than nothing. It is primarily to prevent the transfer of saliva or droplets that people could exhale while they're talking or sneezing. It's to prevent those type of droplets from traveling too far. It's to prevent the spread. That said, my concern with cloth masks would be the following, is that they, in my mind, are not designed for any form of filtration capability. So they are there primarily to prevent droplets from spreading, and then obviously the filtration capability is then called into question. I mean, I have a cloth mask here. I was actually holding it up earlier. I think unfortunately the camera is not going to do it justice, but if I hold it up, maybe you can actually see elements of me through here. This is a 3-ply mask that has been designed by a home environment person who's manufacturing masks. And basically, if I hold it up to the light, I can see Raymond quite clearly through it because it is relatively porous. I understand perfectly that as I exhale, it would capture saliva droplets, etc., and prevent them from spreading, and prevent other people from inhaling them or from it landing in their eyes. I get the point. So I'm quite happy that the average man in the street utilize a cloth mask. So, sorry, let me just deal with this. What's your idea? I mean, Ray, what do you think of cloth masks?
Not really my field of expertise, but
yeah.
It does comply with with the regulations.
Yeah.
As a minimum standard. I do think that it's probably a practical solution in some respects because the employer can provide maybe 2 cloth masks per employee at a minimum. Sure. Yeah. And the employee takes responsibility for watching those, and then you have some control over it. However, having said that, I am concerned that anything short of an N95 mask coming into work where people are using public transport in close proximity to one another, where they're going to be members of the public who are not compliant, not even wearing a face mask, that filtration becomes an issue.
Yeah.
And certainly we need to look at those things fairly carefully. It also depends on the nature of the workspace, thinking from an employment perspective, where there may be unavoidable situations. I expect that in terms of the regulations and workplace plans, people should be working at least 1.5 meters away from each other. But nobody's going to have a perfect score on that.
No, not at all.
And it's simply impossible. So I am concerned that there's still possibility of transfer, and the cloth masks are really, as I understand it, most effective in preventing someone who is sick from transferring it to someone
100%.
else, rather than preventing the transmission from someone sick to you.
Yeah,
100%. So it's more thinking about the other person than yourself, if you will.
Yeah. So these are the things that I have observed when it comes to cloth masks. Is I've seen ones that are probably designed for very small people that are being worn by big people, and it basically just covers the mouth area. I have also generally, when I've engaged with people who are wearing cloth masks, I mean, there was a guy, I was in the pharmacy earlier on today, and I had on a KN95, and the guy was like, hey, where can I get one of those? Because I've got this cloth mask, but it's really uncomfortable to wear, and after you've washed it a couple of times, it's now got little cotton thread sticking out of it, and it tickles your nose, and you shouldn't really be touching your face. And so I've also noticed when people talk, if it's not appropriately designed, it then pulls down, and people are always, and now they're resorting to the worst case scenarios. They're now readjusting this thing the whole time as they're talking to people. The next thing that I would add in with regards to my concern around cloth masks. So a lot of people are trying to substantiate cloth masks for a work environment by saying, hey, look, we've made a hole in the cloth mask where you can now insert some form of filtration device. You know, I question the concept around this. Is that, you know, once you paid for a cloth mask, guys are paying what, 20, 30 Rand for a cloth mask. And the reason why that seems economical to a lot of organizations is you can now wash the cloth mask and reuse it, whereas a lot of single-use PPE then loses its economical kind of benefit when it comes to that. But I mean, if you've got a cloth mask and you're then having to buy filtration pads that you're now sticking into it, you're back where you started with what should be single-use PPE, because you're going to have to pay for those filters. It's probably going to be more economical to have a box of 3-ply surgical than doing all of those kind of things on a daily basis.
Yes.
So that's kind of really my discourse around the cloth mask. It fits on the person's face. It is, this one in cases, okay to use. Yeah, I think also what's been interesting is what seems to be a misnomer with regards to people having to wear face masks when they're out in public. And that seems to be something that is not clear to members of the public. Certain shops may not allow people in if they're not wearing a face mask, and obviously that is their right. And then obviously some enforcement agencies were then stopping people and fining them if they were in the car alone and not wearing a mask, which seems to be it's raised a lot of ire with people, let's put it that way.
It's also not correct. My understanding of the regulations is that you can't be fined for not wearing a mask.
Yeah, 100%. So if we move on to the next one, which is the 3-ply surgical mask, these things have been bought in bulk and they're in the country in their thousands. This for me is something, it's melt blown material. It is not totally dissimilar from the N95s and K95s in structure. However, it doesn't have the same capability. But in terms of utilizing this, there's a metal band, which is then malleable up in the top, which is then bent around the bridge of your nose. You can then pop it on and then pull it down over your nose and mouth. So this for me was a firm favorite, particularly when the traffic police, etc., were pulling people over for not wearing masks. This is, out of all of them, probably the most comfortable. So if I had to wear something in public, or if I had to wear something in an office environment where it was low risk, this would be my go-to. The only negative that I can say around the 3-ply surgical is that it is designed to prevent transfer. It does have some filtration capability, with it being that melt-blown filtered material. However, the only negative aspect with the 3-ply surgical is that depending on your face makeup, not makeup as in that you put on, but the ergonomics of your face, there can be gaps at the side. So it doesn't have the same filtration capability, as in it's not designed to give you what an FFP2 or a KN95 is. I really like these. I think they're comfortable. They are disposable. Now, what I'd like to do is, while I get onto a discussion with regards to the KN95s and the 3-ply, something that we've looked at doing is that with any of these masks, first of all, they are primarily single use, which is fair enough. However, single use, as I've said before in a couple of the webinars, is a luxury that we really don't have at the moment. So one of the options is that you can't clean these things with chemicals. The only two approaches that we've looked at that are suitable for cleaning masks so that you can reuse them is either to pop them in the oven with the oven on at 70 degrees for 10 to 15 minutes. Now, we all know that the virus can't stand for higher than 55 degrees for longer than 5 minutes. So we're building some layers of security, and Raymond just smiling. Why would that be?
I'm just considering the thought of putting a mask in an oven at 180.
No, at 70. Yeah.
At 70, yeah. I had visions. I also had visions of mask-flavored roast beef that night.
Yes, we've experienced that. Taryn put her KN95 in. We'd obviously cooked supper. The oven was a lot hotter than what it should be, and she popped it in on the baking tray, and it disintegrated within seconds. So they don't hold up to adverse heat. That said, the best thing that we've found to be able to sanitize these masks suitably is to apply UVC lighting. So what I did this morning is, there is an organization in Durban North that sells UVC lights for the sanitation of water. So UVC has been used in purifying water and killing germs for many, many years. And even if you have a look at an autoclave within a hospital, they apply UVC light, heat and pressure to be able to kill bacteria, viruses, etc., that could be on medical instruments. So That's if you're going to be. So what I've done is I've designed a box with two 25-watt UVC lights at the bottom, two 25-watt UVC lights at the top. You can then open the box, you stick your masks on a grid, you close it, you turn the light on and leave it in there for 60 seconds. And that will nuke anything that could be on these particular masks. So that seems to be a suitable means of sanitizing. I've done the research. There is numerous articles out of reputable universities in America that speak about the strength of the UVC light and the duration that is required to kill the virus by virtue of it destroying the DNA of the virus, so the strength of the ultraviolet radiation.
If I could just ask a question there.
Go for it.
I assume, contrary to at least one leader's suggestion, that can't be applied internally, but I have read that UVC light can be quite harmful to the eyes. What would you say about people staring into the thing while it's sterilizing the masks?
It shouldn't be done. So what we've done is we've designed an enclosed box with the lights in, with the lid that opens up. So the guys would open up the lid, they would pop the masks into the box, they would close the lid, and they would then turn the UV lights on. So we're going to be supplying the box with an SOP and a risk assessment, because UVC light, you shouldn't, it's the same as ultraviolet radiation, the intensity of ultraviolet radiation that is emitted when people are welding. So one of the things that we know within the health and safety field very well is the potential for arc eyes, which is a very unpleasant experience. It feels as though somebody has poured a bucket of sand into your eyes, and it feels excruciatingly painful. It can result in cataracts in the eyes for prolonged exposure. And also it's the worst form of sunburn that you're going to get. So the device will only be turned on. It's in an enclosed device that people will be using. So definitely, Raymond, it's not something that the general member of the public should be taking out a UVC light and just wafting it over. It needs to be done in a controlled environment. However, what it does do, now, the reason that we've opted for that form of control, I've spoken to many of my construction clients, and one of the concerns that they have is, so under the government guideline, the employer's got to issue 2 masks to the employee. They're then responsible for washing it and laundering it. So how do you know that Joe, who handed in their mask and it got laundered in the morning, goes back to Joe in the afternoon? I don't know if you're comfortable, but I don't know how comfortable I am walking around with Joe's mask on, even after it has been laundered. So one of the benefits of the UV sterilization is 10 guys can literally pop up. You pop their masks into the UV sterilization, 60 seconds within there, it has killed any virus that it's exposed to. We've actually gone overboard in terms of the time and exposure and strength of the UVC lights. It should only be for 30 seconds, but just to dissuade any potential naysayers, we've gone overboard in terms of the exposure, and then it can be handed back to the person. So you don't have the issue of each construction site having to have a washing machine and a line and some way that you can get Joe Smith's mask back to Joe Smith at the end of the day. So it's a very, in my mind, a quick and efficient way.
Nick, where can we get that? I'm going to have clients who are going to be interested in that. How can I get all?
So I'm busy putting the first box together. I'll take some photographs and I will post it on Facebook. The first one should be available tomorrow. So it's a box that I've constructed with 4 UVC lights in. I've taken roof insulation and placed it on the inside of the box. So it is silver on the inside so that the UV light is then reflected all over the box. I've engaged with numerous industry specialists with regards to UVC sanitization over the past week, and it's interesting that UVC light, when it comes down to water, is very effective at killing viruses and bacteria in the water at intense water volumes moving past the light. However, UVC light in air really has about 15 centimeters worth of effective range. So that's why we've put 2 lights at the bottom, 2 lights at the top, and then the masks are going to be sitting in between them with the reflective environment to be able to penetrate into the depths of, I mean, ultimately these masks are filtering devices. So you want to be able to really get down into all the fibers and nitty-gritty places. If I had to say this, I'm advocating that for a standard work environment. I don't necessarily think that I would advocate that type of control for a doctor that is working with COVID-19 infected patients. Doctors should be provided with one of these at the beginning of each surgical intervention and then is disposed of. So we're talking around moderate risk environments where there is a moderate opportunity for COVID to be relevant within that work environment. So for the cleaning and sanitizing of these masks, you can't clean them and sanitize them with chemicals. Heat is good, but if you don't get the heat right, they disintegrate quite quickly. So UVC is my suggested mechanism.
What about people who are going to say, well, can't I get my employees to sanitize their hands that way by sticking their hands in there? What do you respond to that?
If they're looking for an immediate sunburn, yeah, so we're going to write quite a big operating procedure for how these machines are utilized. One of the things that we're looking at importing from China at the moment is a portable wand which has got LED UVC lights on. So it's a little wand that you can open up and you can literally, because I want that for my computer, because I want to be able to take UVC light over my computer because I'm not going to put sanitizer on it. So it's for those type of things that you don't want to put sanitizer on. So it is definitely, I reiterate that, definitely not intended for you to expose your skin or your eyes to the strength of UVC ultraviolet radiation that's going to be created by those devices. They are designed to kill DNA, including yours, if you don't handle it correctly.
It's why I asked the question, because Einstein said that two things in the universe are without limit, are infinite. Stupidity and the universe, and I'm not sure about the universe. So it's important to ask these questions.
Yeah, so again, we're going to issue those with a comprehensive risk assessment and standard operating procedure for people to use. But in my mind, I think it's the most kind of practical and efficient approach. It's not without risk, that said, but I think in an economic time, my suggestion for workplaces is, if I was working in a workplace, this would be something that I would issue to all staff. It can be sanitized at the end of the day. Guys could get a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or even a month's worth of use out of this. They're relatively robust. You could sanitize it at the end of each day, beginning of each day, end of each day, and it can be done easily. It's quick and easy to use, and it is comfortable. Moving on to the next one. So for high risk environments, this is a KN95. And lo and behold, I put it on upside down. So the metal part should be on the bridge of the nose. Now, the benefit of this is it creates a nice space for your nose and to be able to talk and to be able to breathe. It couples onto the side of your face and creates a nice seal, which is obviously which is not what is a viable option with regards to the 3-ply. This forms a seal around the side of the face so that when you breathe, all of the air is filtered through the melt-blown material. Now, and as you heard, I can talk quite easily through it. I can breathe easily. In terms of comfort and protection, the KN95 and the N95, if you can get your hands on it, of course, but those are being reserved for the medical profession. The KN95 is my go-to. We are specialist consultants. As of next week, we will be going around to our client sites to perform audits, etc. This is issued to every member of my team. And I think organizations need to consider those high-risk people or vulnerable people that have to come into the work environment. This should be your go-to mask.
And where can we get those?
So N95s or K95s should be available from most PPE stores. Now, let's just have a discussion around that. There are 3 equivalents. A lot of people have asked me what the difference is between a KN95 and an N95 and an FFP2. So N95 is the American standard for a mask that has been rated to filter out 95% of particulate matter, fumes, vapors, etc. The European standard is FFP2. The FFP2 standard also then rates a mask to filter out 95% of fumes, vapors, and particulate matter. The Chinese standard is the KN95. It's all exactly the same thing. Any mask rated N95, FFP2, or KN95 has been tested and proven to filter out 95% of all particulate matter. The step up from that is the N99, the FFP3, and the KN99. So all of those have been tested and proven to filter out 99% of all particulate matter, fumes, vapors, etc. So if you get hold of an N95, an FFP2, a KN95, that in my mind would be deemed to be the suitable level of protection. Fortunately, I wear glasses. So glasses and that for me are my go-to because I want to be able to protect my eyes from any direct saliva that people may be ejecting from their body. And then obviously the KN95. I bring that back at the end of the day. I've got a sanitizing tunnel. So myself and my wife is in the medical field, medical profession. She uses a KN95. At the end of the day, we stick our masks under UVC light for 60 seconds and they're good to go the next day. So we could effectively use one of these masks for 2-3 weeks and still get a suitable level of protection from them.
So on the subject of protection, and particularly protection of the eyes, what is your take on using plastic face visors, either on their own or in conjunction with a mask?
So I like the principle. I would be happy with, maybe let's take a step back. One of the most important considerations when people are looking at PPE is protection and usability. Now, PPE can render an amazing level of protection to people, but if it is not comfortable or the usability is on the low scale, people will be continually touching it and taking it off. So we need to hold those two in tension and measure them appropriately. For higher risk activities, I would be happy with a pair of safety glasses and or a respirator, those two used in conjunction. What a lot of people are looking to is no respirator, but just having a face shield, which is something I've seen deployed. Yes, it does reduce the risk of any sputum directly, which has got the virus directly coming into my face. We have to also recognize that COVID-19 is not a heat-seeking missile. It doesn't bend around corners and do the most insane things. That said, we need to be cognizant of the fact that it can be airborne. So because of let's say the weight of a droplet of saliva that's in the air, they could waft around in the air for a good few seconds. So I would not hold it beyond the bounds of possibility that if a person is wearing a mask and there is a high amount of water droplets in the air, that it stands within reason that as the person's breathing in, that it could come around the side of the mask. I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that COVID is a heat-seeking missile. But I think from a suitable protection perspective, I would look at both. So a person who's wearing some form of safety glasses or shield over their eyes in conjunction with the respirator. I think one on their own would not be considered the best level of protection the person can give. And I would advocate those for anybody who is dealing with members of the public on a regular basis, where you remember that some people, even if you've taken their temperature, may be asymptomatic.
So just on a practical level, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act provides for at least an hour's break. So generally a tea break, lunch break, tea break for most workplaces. And people can't eat or drink through a mask. So what is the protocol? The employees arrive, they have a mask, everything's clean, everything's in order. They're touching surfaces during the day, they're doing what they have to do, even with hand sanitizers, etc. Come tea time when they want to drink something, come lunch when they want to eat something, what happens?
Absolutely. So what you've identified there, Raymond, is probably one of the higher risk opportunities, whether it be in an industrial setting or on a construction site. So I take my lead from the medical professionals when it comes to the donning and removing of masks. So let's look at Joe, the construction worker on a construction site. He's got his lunchbox with him. if the person now, obviously there should be covered eating facilities provided for construction workers, but obviously the guys may have eaten in a container or in some shade cloth that's spread between containers. I don't think we can advocate that at the moment. So Joe then goes to have his lunch. Joe should have access to sanitizer. And the way that the medical professionals do it is they sanitize their hands. They then take the mask and they take it off. And then they would then sanitize their hands before they eat. Now, I would take the lesser of two evils of some form of contaminant from the sanitizer going in my food, rather than, remember that this has been, in some cases, some person's level of protection that could have water droplets, which are COVID-19 infected, on the front of the mask. So we're frustrating the entire process if we are then going to touch the mask, take it off, eat our food, put COVID-19 inside our mouths, which we've now tried to protect ourselves from. So we need to sanitize, take the mask off, sanitize again, eat our food, sanitize before I put the mask on, sanitize again. We need to get into the habit of, I would really like to see guys sanitizing, and or preferably, first, best case scenario would be washing their hands with soap and water before they consume food, because I have to be cognizant of one, COVID, and also the chemical contaminants that people are going to regularly be eating by virtue of the volume of sanitizer and ethanol or alcohol or whatever it may be that's on their hands.
Then just some practical considerations that you would be advising employers as far as places for people to eat. I'm thinking not only in an industrial context or construction context, but also in the work in an office environment. If they're washing their hands and using sanitizer to take the mask off and then go and eat, and they have to sit at a socially distant place away from other colleagues, and I'm anticipating some challenges on that, especially because in many cultures, sharing of food is a norm. It's not unusual at all. So what are some of the thoughts or some of the considerations that employers should have in their minds when allocating places for their staff to eat and drink?
Yeah. So my approach and advice to employers has been the following. My preference would be that employees make their own food at home. They bring it with them to work. They eat it utilizing their own utensils at their desk. I think people congregating, I'm not a fan of canteens where many people are coming into contact with multiple surfaces. I think the more static people are within a work environment, working in small clusters, smaller groups coming into contact with their own people, working in a cluster, eating with their own utensils and their own food that are providing at work, would be the safest option. I have to obviously hold that in tension with regards to the deep human need for connection. But Raymond, one of my bigger concerns that I would bring to the floor in this discussion would be, if we look at behavior, human behavior when it comes to safety, is that people have a perception of risk. And that perception of risk is so informed by so many parameters: culture, environment, upbringing. And where we are at the moment, and I'm very cognizant of it because I've been listening to the narrative when I'm visiting sites, and the narrative, I've heard it. If I had a rand for every single time I've heard this, I would be rich, where people are saying, let's just get sick and get this over and done with. So that's where people's risk appetite is at the moment.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just like, let's get it over and done with now. And that, from a risk and control perspective, is a significant level of concern for me, where people's perceptions are already at the line where they've evaluated in their own mind, this is not a significant risk for me, financially, ethically, or otherwise. Let's get it over and done with, which means they're not going to be practicing controls. They're not going to be utilizing PPE. And we are now going into level 3, where the majority of the public is going to be moving around at greater levels. And people's risk appetite, they are saturated with COVID. They're saturated with the concept. They just want to get it over and done with.
Yeah. So one of the conversations I'm having regularly is the idea that this isn't such a big deal. Okay, so lots of people are dying, but lots of people die from car accidents, this is an overreaction. And if you look at the statistics in South Africa, every 3 weeks, the death rate has doubled.
Yeah.
Every 3 weeks, that's a big number. It started small, but we're now at levels that are really significant. And the part of the challenge is the comorbidities. Is South Africa, and KZN in particular, has very high coincidence of TB and HIV, both of which are immunosuppressors. And there's a real risk, if there's a massive breakout of significant death rates, not only death rates, because that's terrible, but most people aren't going to die. But those who don't die, many are going to suffer significant symptoms, which are going to render them incapable of working for a significant period.
Yeah.
And obviously, as soon as they go home and they're sick, if they live with other people, and most people do, that means a very high rate of transfer and infection, people that they live with. So whilst lockdown was designed to give the state, really, and private health, the opportunity to shore up its infrastructure to support the sick and the dying to come, I think there's a misconception that once we move to level 3 and level 2 and so on, that actually the worst of the pandemic is over. And it really isn't. It's still to come.
Yeah, 100%. You know what, I have been drawn into many discussions recently with regards to the ethics of it. And for me, the tension is between that lives and livelihood. And the balance is now swinging in the other direction, is more towards livelihoods, because it's plain to see that our economy is bordering on collapse if we don't get back to work.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, but I really appreciate what President Ramaphosa said on Sunday, and I take it to heart, is it's now up to you, South Africa. And we need to echo those sentiments loudly as often as we can. And I'll give you an example from a discussion that I had today. Obviously, religious organizations are potentially around, it hasn't been gazetted yet, are potentially allowed to resume church. When asked for my opinion today, I said the following. I said, guys, I personally would not be in a rush to go back to church. And the reason for that, my particular lens, is the following. Both myself and my wife are self-employed. Kids should not be going to church because they can't practice the same discipline of social distancing that I can. So that would mean one adult going to church, one of them staying at home with the kids. Now, because both my wife and I are self-employed, if I get COVID, there's a good chance that it will get into my house. There's a good chance that both myself and my wife could get infected. That would mean, it's like I don't have the benefit of a set salary at the end of the month if I'm not working. If I don't work, I don't get paid. And although we have savings, etc., we've built with wisdom, but it's not prudent for me to be able to do that. So I understand everybody's elation at the opportunity to go and worship together. And as I said to the guys this morning, it might be legal. It doesn't make it safe. In fact, this is when the infection rate is going to be escalating. And if you have a look at the factual evidence that's been given to us, the worst outbreaks have come from group gatherings, funerals, and church gatherings that were held prior to lockdown. Those have been the worst outbreaks that have occurred. So I re-echo those sentiments that South Africa is in our hands now to be able to make the best decisions that we can around the situations. And I'm not advocating the fact that we don't meet. Meeting is incredibly important. I think the way that people meet, there are so many variables that need to be considered, and I don't think it's clever that people meet for meeting's sake, because there is a significant risk that it proposes to people in their livelihoods. And I would be deeply concerned about many elderly people who want to now meet in religious organizations on a Sunday because they have been without contact for some time and they're just desperate for connection. But that has to be meted against. If you do that and you get sick, you are going to be placing a burden on a healthcare system that doesn't have the capability. There's so much careful thought process that needs to be done around this.
Agreed.
So that said, I'm actually meeting with a couple of organizations next week to help them write their protocols on how they would consider resuming meetings, and to be able to write a risk assessment and plan it as we've done for other businesses, from people entering the site and people parking to people entering the premises, and how they do it, and the level of ventilation within the area, and the fact that doors should be open, people shouldn't be handling stuff that everybody else is touching, like doorknobs, etc. What do we do around those common pieces of equipment, like sound equipment and cameras and stuff, or musical instruments and chairs that people are going to be touching? 100%. All of those kind of things that are part of the religious gathering liturgy can present in itself, can be harmful, and we need to be cognizant of those things. And what I've suggested to our organization is that we are going to develop a document, and obviously I have the benefit of being a specialist with this environment, and we're going to put together a risk assessment and a protocol, which we're happy to share with other churches at no charge, so that they can take the benefit of the access to specialized thinking, people who are experts in this area, as to what they should be considering as they resume meeting.
So, and obviously that's going to apply across various faiths. You think of mosques and prayer times.
Absolutely.
Think of Hindu temples, which can be quite crowded. There are all kinds of considerations. We've got a question here from Kerry Leaf in Herden. She asks, for an office environment, is it fine if our staff wash their own masks at home? It's going to be a burning question, I imagine, for many offices next week. What do you say to that? So,
good question. I think there is a reason that the DOEL, Department for Occupations and Employment, or what was previously the Department of Labor, so it's the Department of Employment and Labor, have said that the employer must wash the mask, must launder it. Now, in my mind, the rationale behind that is, I don't want people, and again, also the rationale for 2 masks is I don't want people taking dirty, possibly COVID-infected stuff that they've had back into their home environment, where they can now potentially infect their home. So I'm not a naysayer on it. There is wisdom in why the government has suggested that they should be laundered by the organization, because I would hate, and there's a reason behind this. Let's take it from a hazardous chemical substance perspective. Let's say I'm working on a mine and I've got an overall, and my overall has now come into contact with chemicals and soot and dust, etc. If I had to now be responsible for taking that overall home and laundering it with my family's laundry, I think that would be seen as negligent on behalf of the company. And the reason being is that as a full-grown male, I have the ability to be able to process certain levels of chemicals in certain concentrations. My kids, on the other hand, don't share that same ability. They are smaller. They are possibly more vulnerable receptors. Let's say you've got kids at home. So my suggestion around that particular thing would be no. I would not suggest it. I believe, possibly from a liability perspective, that because the employer is not following the guideline or the directive from the DOEL, that they could potentially consider some form of liability there. And heaven forbid somebody should take something home to their family that they have gained exposure to in the work environment. So my long-winded explanation to that would be, I wouldn't suggest it.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Ray, any more questions from your side?
None from me.
Oh, excellent.
That's been very illuminating. Thank you.
No, absolute pleasure. And again, it's always great spending time with you. And we'll come up with a topic for next week's discussion around compliance.
Just one thing before we go. If you would please just post on social media, and I'll share it as well, the resources that you refer to get the masks, to get the PPE, to get the sanitizer, all of those things, so that we can start getting it out, because obviously shops open next week.
Yeah.
When I say
so
shops,
all of these items, whether it be 3-ply surgical or KN95, infrared non-contact thermometers, we have them in stock. We do supply them, but I say that carefully, because I didn't want the conversation to be presumed that I have a particular lens and I'm trying to promote something. So people are more than welcome to buy it from whoever they want to. However, if you are looking, we've obviously sourced this. We have all the certification, the CE test reports, the FDA approval, the test reports for all of the products that we bought in. So it has been sourced and certified. So we've got the right types of products. But I think what organizations need to do, if I left you with this parting shot, would be the following. The DOEL directive has said to employers that they need to consider risk when considering what PPE to apply. The risk, as I said in last week's webinar, is significant enough that if one person gets it, it could close your business down. Businesses need to consider providing their employees with the best type of protection that they can provide. One from a compliance perspective and the other one from a human ethical perspective. So guys need to look at something that is not just a kind of a cheaper option for the man in the street, but within a work environment, something that has been scientifically tested to give you a factor of protection that you can rely on. So that would be, but I will gladly post. We have an online PPE store, and I will post the link to that in our social media. So you can buy them online from our PPE store. Thanks, Ray. Good chatting with you again, and catch up